Great. And so some musicians say that, you know, musicians that are training and so forth need to be focusing exclusively on their craft and not thinking about these kind of business issues and diversifying what they do. How do we balance that, do you think?
Well, you know, there's a lot of hours in the day, and when you're first, you know, when you're practicing and you're in college, you know, you don't have a lot of time for these business type of activities. But right after college, you'll probably find yourself with more free time than you ever had. And, you know, you can only practice a certain number of hours in the day. And and I think there's always time to be able to think about where you want to go with your career, how you want to make money doing what you love to do. And that's play whatever instrument or sing, you know, playing your kinds of music that you really love. So I think there's plenty of room for doing different things. And but one thing you definitely need to do is to keep your playing at a high level. And that can be difficult as you get older, you know, because you get busy and, you know, you may start teaching and, you know, teaching takes time away. But you have to keep your level up, and once you have your main thing, the main thing that you can really do and you can sit next to anybody and feel good about, then you add your extra, you know, your other sort of product lines, let's call it, you know. And one of those would be making a living, you know, figuring out how to be a successful professional. You know, when I was telling you I just dawned on me when the first question you asked me about how did I get going, I only took it up to age 5. No, actually, I think I went to age 16 when I took the clarinet. Took up the saxophone. But also, all during this period, I, you know, played classical music on the clarinet and jazz on the saxophone. And I was of course, a major music major in college. I'm from Denver, and I went to the University of Denver. I lived at home. And then I went to Michigan State, and I got a master's in woodwinds, because by that time I'd been playing a lot of flute and clarinet and trying to, you know, think I'd be a, quote, studio musician. And so that was a good thing for me to do. And I also, at the time, there were some more job opportunities in college for people who could teach other woodwind instruments in addition to their main instrument at some of the smaller schools. So I did that, got the master's, and then I was accepted to come to Eastman, but the Vietnam War got in the way, and I was going to be drafted, so I had to find a place that would not be in Vietnam. So I called a friend of mine who had just auditioned at West Point, and he got in. I called him up. I said, "What's going on at West Point?" He says, "Oh, you know, maybe we can get you an audition." And back in those days, they did them differently than today. Today, the military bands advertise and everything. Back then, they didn't advertise. You called them up. You said, "Would you listen to me? Could I come and do?" And they would maybe say, "Well, we've got nothing going, but we'll listen to you. You went to a good school, but there's probably not going to be an opening for another 9 months." So anyway, they let me audition. I went there and got in, and they said, "Well, you could be here in October." I said, "Okay." So then I had to go to basic training, and then I went to West Point, not as a cadet, but as an enlisted man in the Army. But the great thing is, you know, it's a special band, and you're given the rank of sergeant, and the pay is decent for what it is. Now it's very good.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of perks, like healthcare and all that stuff. So then after that, came back to, I sort of froze my application at Eastman, and they said, okay, we'll give you your $200 back or whatever it was. And they said, we'll keep your file, and you'll have to audition again, but your paperwork is all there. And I was already accepted there, so they'll just check your playing, and if you're still good, you'll get in. So that's what happened. I auditioned, and I came to Eastman. And then I won't go into the whole. I'll give you a brief thing. One of the clarinet teachers got sick and had to leave in the middle of the year, and so they needed somebody. And I was, had a pretty good reputation at school, and they asked me to do it, and I said sure, and so I did. And lo and behold, the guy didn't come back the next fall, and so I continued on. And then the year after that, I got my DMA, and they offered me a job as full time. So I was right place, right time, and that's how I ended up being at Eastman. And that was I came to Eastman in 1970, so 45 years, and 43 of those years on the faculty. So that's my story there.
Great. Yeah, thanks for giving us the full range of it. Another question that I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier, that sometimes we don't really know how to define music entrepreneurship, and that sometimes what it is a little murky, and I think sometimes it's unclear, the idea of freelancing for musicians, has been around for a while. And so do you have any thoughts about, entrepreneurship and like you talked about, an idea that transitioned into creating value, how we can differentiate that from freelancing? Because it seems like sometimes people say, well, music entrepreneurship, it just sounds like freelancing, which is nothing new, right?
Yeah, well, freelancing is, is self-employed, and self-employed isn't necessarily being an entrepreneur. It's possible for freelancers, the freelancers who just wait for the phone to ring, to really not be very entrepreneurial. And on the other hand, there's freelancers who are creating things, looking for things, always have projects going, meeting people, thinking of interesting things, thinking of ways to put their music in front of people. Those are really the entrepreneurs. And I think it's only in the past 15, 20 years that we've been thinking of musicians as entrepreneurs. I once had this girl. She was actually taking a course, I think, at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and it was a journalism course, and she wanted to interview me, and so she came over to my studio, and she's interviewing me, and she said, "Well, who was the first music entrepreneur?" Like that's like a question you ask somebody like, who invented the airplane? Who was the first man on the moon? No, who was the first music entrepreneur? So it sort of threw me, but I thought, then I immediately said, well, I guess Mozart was, because he didn't have a steady gig. He didn't work for the church or for a prince or a king or a queen. He was putting concerts together. His dad was hauling him all over Europe, and his dad was a big entrepreneur, having old Leopold play gigs and stuff, So I said, well, I think maybe Mozart was, but I'm sure that my musicology buddies could take it way, way back, and earlier than that, to the troubadours and trouvères and all those guys, But it's true, Beethoven was doing the same thing. I think he even sold some of his music, he would sell something in Leipzig and then he'd go to another publisher in another country because, you know, back in those days, by horse, that was a long way away, you know, and he'd sell it to them too. They were doing all kinds of things. I'm not saying that that's a good thing to do if you're an entrepreneur, but, you know, people have had to hustle, you know, to make a living, you know, a good living. And that's what's really the good thing about it when you think about it, because, you know, you're never going to be bored because you're doing things that you're really interested in, and you know, when you have some skin in the game, as they say, you know, when your money's on the line or your reputation, you have a tendency to really try to do a good job. It's a lot different being a leader than being just somebody who you hired to play the gig. You really, you know, want to make this thing happen. So, yeah, freelancing, and I think it's the attitude. A lot of freelancers are very entrepreneurial, but then again, a lot of them aren't.
Great. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, you wrote this book, Lessons from a Streetwise Professor, What You Won't Learn at Most Music Schools. And it has a wealth of information on what you're talking about, sort of the savviness, the business side of being a musician today. And I was curious if you had a couple of things to share, if there's a couple of like really key skill areas or experiences that you think musicians should focus on that maybe musicians aren't focusing on or haven't focused a lot on until now.
Well, I think music-wise, it's being versatile, you know, being able to fit into all kinds of different situations, so that, you know, because it's so easy to get typecast into certain areas. People like that, you know, they like to think of you doing a certain thing. But the more versatile you are, the more options that you have. And on the other side, the business side, is you need to know how to handle money. When I taught my class entrepreneurial thinking, we'd always do one session at least on just money, what to do, you know, how to invest it. You know, of course, it's just a big overview, but at least they get to know what's some of the jargon that goes with that. And I would almost every time I'd ask them to raise their hands, not counting student loans, you know, something about their financial status. And somebody was always in trouble to the point they were thinking of going bankrupt. You know, and these are people that are 25 years of age and under. You know, and so I think it's important that you know how to do that, know how to put a budget. Essentially, it is, you know how much money is coming in, and you can't spend more money that comes in. You know, and to boot, you should be trying to save some of it. So that's one thing, how to handle money. The other thing is what we used to say during my day is making money while you sleep. That's the way you make money. You know, if in a musician, if we play a gig, we're like a barber. We cut somebody's hair, they get 20. You know, you're a barber, you cut their hair, you get $20. See you later. The next person sits down, you know, it's $20. It's, you know what it is. You know, but if you can find ways to do some things one time and get lots of mileage out of it, in other words, have royalties or residuals, those kinds of things, then it's a really good income stream to do. So what are those kinds of things? Well, one is a composer, or arrangers, or people who have ideas, for books, those kinds of things. So you do them once, and those, to me, they're like little fruit trees. I use this all the time. You do a chart. It's a little fruit tree. It's there, and you put it out, and it makes whatever it makes. Let's say it makes $100. But next year, if it makes $100, that's pretty good because you don't have to do anything to get the $100. And so one little tree, no big deal. But if you've got an orchard, then you're starting to talk something. It turns into a very good thing. So those things, try to find out how to make money while you sleep. Another thing would be know about grants, because grants are good things. They're possible. It's hard for somebody studying, I don't know, how to be an accountant, to get a grant. I don't know of any accounting grants, okay? But in music, you can find some of these things. And sometimes you have to dig, and when you dig, you may find ones that not many people know about, and, they're relatively easy to get, some money, to do something that you would have done anyway. So getting grants, it's a big deal. And then another thing is to think of yourself as a business, which I touched on a little while ago. The mom and pop store, you've got one product, it's clarinet. You expand on it, you have bass clarinet, E flat, maybe saxophone, maybe, flute. That could open up something. Maybe you can play some Broadway, when Broadway shows come to town, maybe you can do that. And nowadays there's all kinds of Broadway type shows that are being presented in theater companies. So those things are always a possibility. But what you do is you think about you as what you do is you, Inc. Okay? You build a career around your interests and your talents, and you're never going to get bored, and you're going to be able to go as long as you want to go, because it's what you love to do. That's the great thing about music, especially if you're an entrepreneur and more or less working for yourself. And you can be an entrepreneur inside a company too, inside a school. You could be a person who has some ideas and brings them forward to the administration, and get some things going there too. So those business kinds of things are very important, but the main thing is you've got to be a good player. You've got to be, as a friend of mine says, you have to have something to say. And then the second thing is knowing how to say it, or finding out how to say it. If you don't have anything, you can put lipstick on a pig, okay, but it's still a pig. Okay, so having something to say and figuring out how to say it. That's what I advise people to do, is try to do your own thing and then figure out how to get paid for it.
Great. Yeah, lots of great thoughts there. Thanks, Ray. Another thing, you sort of mentioned these things I was just going to ask you about, but maybe you have other sort of advice. But many musicians graduating from music schools today seem to be entering a really competitive field, like you mentioned earlier. And like you said, there's maybe less full-time jobs. But on the other hand, maybe there's even more opportunity for people to be creating their own path. So first of all, do you think that's fair to say about the industry today? And secondly, for young musicians that are going out into that world, besides the many great pieces of advice you just gave, are there any other things that you would tell a young person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are an awful lot of opportunities today that weren't there before. You know, if you just think about recording industry and publishing, you know, those, like in the recording industry, it's you used to have to get a record label. You couldn't get noticed if you didn't have your, were with somebody who could distribute it. But now with the internet, that's taken the middleman out, and so you can put your thing together and get to people all over the world, whereas before you had to go through a publisher. One person that I read once likened this to the French Revolution, where the people took over, threw out the king and queen, and they ruled. That's what's happened in the recording industry. There's very few labels anymore, really, and so you're able to put your thing together and reach a wide audience. And same with publishing. You can put out, and I got to tell you though, it's a little hard to sell any kind of numbers, but you can put your own thing out there and still reach the people you want, especially if it's a real niche kind of market that you're going for. So I think lots of opportunities there. But if you're wondering a little bit about, whether you should be in music or not, or whatever, that kind of stuff, or don't know exactly what you want to do, you've got to ask yourself or try to figure out what really turns you on when you get up in the morning. What really is it that you like? I think many people in music come in as freshmen, and all they know is that they had a good time in band. They loved their band director, choir director, orchestra director. They liked it, and it was just great. And now they want to, play the French horn or whatever. And they don't really think of what am I going to do after this? It's when you're in college, then you start thinking after a year or so, what am I going to do? And that people usually say, get a master's degree. Okay, well that prolongs it for 2 years. But at some point you have to decide what you're going to do. But the idea of doing something so you can fall back on it is just, I don't think it works. Because I don't know anybody, I think I could really say this too, I don't think I know anyone who's really been a success at anything they did that was their second choice. Just, their thing, they did it to fall back on. You want people to, you say, okay, well, I'll get a music ed degree because I can always fall back on that. We don't want people teaching our kids in music ed, that are falling back on something, not really doing what we want to find the person who loves teaching kids, okay? And so I think it's true, You've got to go for what you really want to do, whatever it is. So that's what you have to figure it out, And you may not know right off the bat, and that's okay too, because in school you can figure out all kinds of, if you expose yourself to a lot of different kinds of music, you can really get turned on to certain things and find, man, could be something here. I really love doing this thing, So that's my sort of advice there,
Great. Well, I want to turn to questions that have come in from viewers, and I want to remind people that you can submit a question on the Google Hangout if you're watching there, or you can send us a tweet on Twitter using the hashtag #PolyHangout. So a couple questions that have come in here. Ray, one just says, do you have any thoughts on how to begin the process of learning about finances for musicians. Like you talked about the importance of that. Um, any resources or first steps for people to look at for that topic?
Well, one of the things you can do is to find out what's deductible as a musician, what deductions you're entitled to. And you can, if you're in the musicians union, you get the International Musician, and in it, usually every April, maybe March issue, they give a list of everything that's deductible. And even if you're not a musician, you can go to the library and you can get a copy of this, and you may even be able to get it online. I'm not sure if you can access the whole thing. But anyway, just finding out what is deductible for you. Like every CD, this is after you're out of school and you're making money. Every CD you buy, every reed, every mute, every string is an expense that you take against money that comes in. Office and home. This is my little office I'm in right now. It's where I work, and because of that, a certain percentage is taken off the entire expenses of the house, like the heating and the air conditioning and the phones and those kinds of things. But now there's rules about this too. You know, you've got to do certain things. You can't, in your office at home, you can't have a pool table in there. It's got to be all, all business kind of thing. But those things, office and home. Let's see what else. Oh, depreciation of your instruments. You know, you can write your instruments down, but when you go to sell them, you've got to do a couple of things. We've got some very good articles about this on polyphonic.org. Just go there and search Bill Hunt. Bill Hunt is his name. He's a musician in the Rochester Philharmonic and also has an MBA in finance, and he does tax preparation. And I tell you, his articles are the most popular on our site. So check them out, especially at this time of year. You'll find all kinds of things. So you need to find out about taxes and how to handle that stuff. And then another thing is just to try to get some money jargon down. So all you have to do is pick up a magazine that's sort of the equivalent of, well, it's not National Enquirer, but it's sort of a low-end finance thing, and that's called Money Magazine. You pick up Money Magazine and you'll look at that and you'll start seeing some things and learning some of the terms, and it's just sort of kind of becoming familiar with them. But one thing you've got to be very careful about is not to be really confident or read an article where a certain stock has been recommended and then you go out and buy it. That's a good way to get burned. I've been there, okay? It can happen. You can't do that. So it's and any money you do in the market, it's got to be money you're willing to lose, especially if it's an individual stock. So it takes study. If you like doing that, that's good. You can have a good time doing it. I have several friends that are really into it, and they've done very well. If you don't like doing that, you can learn who to give, who you can hire to help you with these investment decisions. So the main thing, though, is just to remember about compound interest. I call it the eighth wonder of the world. And in my book, I've got a grid that shows how much can be accumulated over time, over like the course of your working life, let's say from age 25 to 65, how much can be accumulated just at a sort of an average kind of interest rate, but always letting it ride, the compound interest. It's possible, I'd have to look it up to remember now, but I think $40 a month gets you $1 million after 40 years, something like that, at 7%. And you can get 7% in the stock market because that's what it has returned over time, over the past 50 or 60 years. So, just try to become, just pick up things along the way and talk with people about it. But be careful, you don't want to lose everything. Don't invest in gas wells in Oklahoma, okay?
Great. Another question that's come in is a great question. We didn't mention this, so the question is, where can we find your book? So where can people get the Lessons from a Streetwise Professor?
Well, they could come to the Eastman bookstore, but if you live in Canada, it doesn't make sense. But you can get this online at Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble Nook. You can get it at Apple. You can buy it from Jamie Aebersold. All those places. It's very easy. Just easiest way is to go to Amazon, type in my name or type in Streetwise Professor, and you'll find it. If you feel like it, you can go to my website, rayricker.com, and you can see those same things. I don't sell it from my website, but you'll be able to click on that, and it'll take you right to a place that has it. Thanks for that question, by the way.
Well, we're getting close to our time that we said we would wrap up. So I want to just obviously thank Ray for being here, taking the time to give us some insights on music entrepreneurship in the 21st century. Ray, are there any other things that we didn't talk about that you want to mention, or anything that you want to wrap up with?
I think just maybe a couple things that maybe students could do as they prepare for the 21st century, and that's what really you have to do. However old you are right now, you've got to be thinking, what do I want to be doing for the next 50 years, from this day forward out? Not looking back, but looking forward. And of course, you don't know what is going to be out there. In my case, when I graduated from college in 1965, computers were, 3 or 4 times bigger than the studio that I'm in right here, okay? And now we've got them on our watches, So those things weren't there. So you can't really prepare yourself for the next big thing. But what you can do is really build your thing on good performance and knowing something about music, about the history and those kinds of things, and being curious. So, and thinking creatively. And if you've got those elements, when something comes along, you're going to be able to make the transition into the real world. So my advice would be practice, be the best you can be. And what a great job students have nowadays, If you're in school, that's your job. You're not going to have that job again for a long time. And try to experience a broad range of different kinds of musical genres. If you're a jazz person, go to an opera, go to an orchestra concert. Check out the early music things. There's stuff to be learned in every one of these, genres. Think of breadth and depth. When you put your career together, have it be broad and as deep as you can make it, especially deep in what is really in the areas that are really your specialty. Your instrument should be real deep, and everything else should be as deep as possible, as humanly possible, that you have the time to do. And try to specialize, but also it's a similar thing. You know, you've got to specialize things, but try to know as much as you can about a lot of things. And be as fluent as possible with technology. That's a big deal. You guys know that. You have to know that now, okay? It's changing so fast. What is it? The iPad wasn't here 5 years ago, okay? Now we're using it for everything. So, and as far as schools go, probably nobody from the school here listening, but what they have to do is get away from the 1950s curriculum. It's different. Things are different, and students need to be prepared for the life that they're going to live in, the world, the musical world that they're going to live in. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry for preaching.
That's why we're interviewing you, right? To get your expertise and thoughts. So, on behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us tonight, and certainly for more of Ray's thoughts on music entrepreneurship, you can get a hold of his book, Lessons from a Streetwise Professor: What You Won't Learn at Most Music Schools, which is just a great title. And I've read it, so I can attest that it's a fantastic book. And we hope that you'll join us for our next Spring Polyphonic Hangout. It's going to be Tuesday, April 14th at 8 p.m. with Nancy Christensen, who's the founder and president of Christensen Arts LLC, an artist management firm based in New York City. And so we'll be talking with Nancy about all things artist management and what musicians maybe should know about artist management, and from the other side, from Nancy, how she got into this career, and maybe for aspiring arts managers, things to think about. So I hope you join us for that. Again, that's April 14th at 8 p.m. More information is available on polyphonic.org.
Steve?
Yeah.
Let me throw something in here. Nancy is a really good pianist. She went to Eastman. She was an accompanist or collaborative pianist and a good soloist too, and somebody who worked in our concert office at Eastman and just sort of found that she liked that, and now she represents clients and musicians and stuff. That's just something that happened while she was at school. Never thought she'd be doing that. Thought she'd be teaching piano lessons someplace, you know. So sorry I throw that in, but it's kind of...
yeah, perfect example. Yeah, she's an entrepreneur. She started her own company, and so yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Absolutely. Great. Well, I want to say thanks again to Ray, and thanks to all you out there who are watching and listening tonight, and we look forward to seeing you in April.
Okay, bye. Thanks. Thanks, Steve.
All right. Thanks.